Today's topic is why Vivekananda matters. And we've just celebrated the Vivekananda Puja with Swami Ishtananda being here. And so this is a real good time to talk about what is Vivekananda, who is Vivekananda, and why is he so important? So I'm going to be sharing my views with you from the standpoint of a Western sannyasini, 51 years in the order, and a woman. So why is Vivekananda important? It's because of his impact on American spirituality. And we'll go into this a little bit later, maybe privately. Why American spirituality? Why not Indian spirituality? On November 8th, 2010, United States President Barack Obama addressed the Indian Parliament. He said, "You have shown that the strength of India, the very idea of India, is its embrace of all colors, castes, and creeds. It's the diversity represented in this chamber today. It's the richness of faiths celebrated by a visitor to my hometown of Chicago more than a century ago, the renowned Swami Vivekananda. He said that holiness, purity, and charity are not the exclusive possessions of any church in the world, and that every system has produced men and women of the most exalted character." So Vivekananda's words are as soul-stirring today as they were in 1893, a significant testament to his impact on America. Let's talk a little bit about his appearance at the Parliament of Religions in 1893, over 100 years ago. Americans were taken by surprise when this foreigner aroused and inspired them with the message of their innate divinity, the goal of God realization, the unity of existence, and the harmony of religions. At the end of the Swami's message, a stampede of women climbed across the parliament benches just to get a close look at this man of God who had uttered this. In fact, to hold the audience at the parliament, Vivekananda was saved as the last speaker of each day. This is our Vivekananda. Such was his impact that in 1976, the Smithsonian Institute recognized the Swami as one of 29 eminent foreign visitors who at the 1893 Parliament of Religions, quote, charmed audiences with his magical oratory and left an indelible mark on America's spiritual development. Because of such an introduction, Vedanta is now here in America to stay. The historian Carl Jackson explained, as an Oriental religious group preaching an alien message in an often hostile environment, this has been a considerable achievement. Now, we've come a long way since then. I joined way back in 1971. In the 1960s, comparative religions had just entered the college curriculum because at that time there was what is called the Great Church Exodus, when 2/3 of Christians and Jews in this country left their congregations, disillusioned with church authority and government authority. So that was my introduction to Vedanta. Jackson goes on, most new religious movements collapse within a single generation. However, the Vedanta movement has established firm foundations and is today in more flourishing condition than it has ever been. It has won increasing public acceptance, integrated a far-reaching movement, and found necessary channels to the outside public. So in the 1960s, the audience that we looked at were all Westerners. Asian immigration had not yet opened up in the 1970s. So this was really quite remarkable. And at that time, Swami Prabhavananda in Southern California. Then we had Swami Akhilananda in Boston and Providence. And we had Nikhilananda Swami in New York. These were magnets that attracted the top intellectuals, artists of the day, scientists of the day. So how did this non-indigenous religious tradition become a visible and successfully integrated presence in a predominantly Judeo-Christian culture? In October 2nd, 2011, in the Wall Street Journal, writer and journalist Annie Bardock, who is a Vedantist, initiated by Swami Swahananda. She was famous when she interviewed Fidel Castro. She was the only one at that time to be allowed into Cuba to interview him. She wrote the article, How Yoga Won the West. And Bardock explained how Vivekananda's magnetic personality and spellbinding message of the divinity of the soul captivated Americans as he lectured the length and breadth of America. And along with that, Vivekananda gave his Western audience, she said, a simple and perfectly American prescription for life, work, and worship. And we'll cover this approach in more detail a little later. However, it was during his address at the final session of the parliament that Vivekananda cemented his attraction with Americans. They heard for the first time this peace-giving truth of religious harmony, a message that would sweep across their land well into the 21st century. This was all new to Americans. He said, "Do I wish that the Christian would become a Hindu? God forbid. Do I wish that the Hindu or Buddhist would become a Christian? God forbid. But each must assimilate the spirit of the others and yet preserve his individuality and grow according to his own law of growth." This was a non-threatening and a non-proselytizing invitation to open our heart and mind to an ancient non-sectarian tradition, ancient and non-sectarian, and drink in its waters of spirituality. Today, Vivekananda is recognized as a pioneer of East-West dialogue. When I first came to Dallas, our first outside speaker was Swami Sri Dharananda, who is just an incredible cyclonic Swami in Australia. He has built so many centers there since he was posted there. And so I thought, okay, this is our opportunity. And so I got on my computer and I started email. I sent out 100 invitations to professors in religious studies, in psychology, philosophy, history, to all the various colleges and universities here. And I received 10 responses, which in telemarketing is pretty good. And those 10 professors stayed with me for years and years and years here, and I worked with them. And they would invite me to speak to their classes, and I would invite them here to speak to our audience. And some of them would hold, one from Southern Methodist University taught interreligious dialogue. And so he would invite his students to come here, and they would engage in interreligious dialogue with some of our folks. And it was an amazing experience. But this was all new to our trustees. And so early on, when the Parliament Committee was thinking of coming to Dallas, they wanted to come to our tiny little center, which was, we didn't have this hall. It was a simple little monastery with a chapel. And so the trustees, they asked me, why is he coming here? Why are they coming here? And why do you go out and lecture at these universities and colleges when it doesn't bring any money for the center? We were a little poor at the time. And so we have a huge standing photograph of Vivekananda in our monastery living room, and I pointed to him and I said, because of him. That's why they're coming to this tiny little center. And so I happen to have to go back to our Hollywood center. I have to go back twice a year because this is yet to become an official center. And that's the rules of the order. And so they said, well, what are we going to do? And I said, you're in charge. You have to research and find out why the World's Parliament of Religions needs to come to Dallas, Texas. And they enjoyed themselves. And they learned a lot. Because Vivekananda founded his American roots as Vedanta, rather than the more culturally loaded term Hindu, Westerners were able to resist their knee-jerk reaction to reject what was foreign sounding and therefore alien. This was, this was in the 1940s when these swamis first started taking over in this country. They wore Western clothes. They didn't go out in the street like our young swamis do today in their garawas. No, no. There was racial discrimination. There was religious discrimination. So they had to fit in. Vivekananda promised, I form no sect, no organization. Instead, his Western mission was clear from the start. He said, I propound a philosophy which can serve as the basis of every possible religious system in the world, which in America attracted Christians and Jews, many followers, which became hyphenated Vedanta Christians and Vedanta Jews. Yes, we've had rabbis, we've had ministers as devotees, initiated devotees. Furthermore, by publishing his 4 yogas, and for those of you who are new, those are really the 4 pillars of Vedanta, a must read. And for those of you who are interested in initiation, Swami Sarvadevananda requested me to mention Bhakti Yoga is so important. It gives you the metaphysical basis of mantra. So this Bhakti, Raja, Karma, and Jnana yogas are the 4 pillars of Vedanta. And in them, Vivekananda answered America's need to explore the essence of Vedanta in a language that we could all understand. As a Swami prophesied, his written works were to, quote, make out of dry philosophy and intricate mythology and queer, startling psychology a religion which shall be easy, simple, popular, and at the same time meet the requirements of the highest minds. And that's what happened. When after Vivekananda's Harvard lecture in 1896, William James and his colleagues invited Vivekananda to chair Harvard's new department, an invitation that was promptly followed by the Columbia University's own offer. But due to his vows of renunciation, Vivekananda declined them both. He was a wandering sadhu. In 1893 to 1897, Vivekananda was invited to lecture throughout America, and he met some of the best minds at that time. William James, the founder of Western psychology, Nikola Tesla, the discoverer of the electromagnetic field, John D. Rockefeller, whom he inspired to serve through his philanthropy, artists such as Sarah Bernhardt, the actress, and Madame Colvay, the opera star, Jane Addams, the activist, reformer, social worker. He was offered the chair of the Harvard Divinity School, which he declined because he was a wandering sannyasin. But he went on to found 2 Vedanta societies, one in New York in 1894 and one in San Francisco in 1900, during his second trip to America. Now, Vivekananda neither proselytized, converted, nor charged for spirituality, which was refreshing for Americans. 60%, as I said, of whom had left their religion during America's great church exodus of the 1960s, due to their disenchantment with church authority, dogma, and the business of religion. Since the 1960s, American scholars and clergy regarded Vedanta as one of the official voices of Hinduism, largely due to Vivekananda's impact at the 1893 Parliament and the standard he set for his emissaries in America, most of them disciples of the direct disciples or of Holy Mother. So it was no surprise, because Vivekananda at the Parliament of Religions in 1893 is considered the pioneer of interfaith dialogue. Yes, this explosion of interspiritual and interfaith dialogue is due to him. American-born Vedantists are drawn to Vedanta's interreligious and academic mission in the West, a huge movement of inclusivity and harmony. Yes, this is a very important but hidden part of our work in America. Our congregations don't see the interreligious and interspiritual dialogues that take place in our centers, or the fact that we go out and are part of interspiritual councils and interreligious councils. Nor did they see the 600 students coming through our convent in Santa Barbara every year. They would come through for a field trip to hear about Vedanta, or we would be invited to their schools. Sometimes they were senior citizen communities, sometimes they were the university, the colleges, high schools, junior high schools, unwed mothers, you name it. We spoke. On the one hand, native-born Hindus, by and large, have little interest in interreligious exchange with Christians or Muslims. And this I found when I first came here. And that's understandable, because they've been historically scorned for their religion and their temples have been desecrated. But on the other hand, Westerners embrace comparative religions and interfaith venues because this is often how we were introduced to Vedanta. In my case, it was through a college class. And I was an agnostic at the time, raised Christian, but agnostic. But those interreligious and interspiritual dialogues, some of our early members, trustees, they engaged and they were absolutely swept away. There was especially one that was requested by the director of global theology at Southern Methodist University, Dr. Robert Hunt, whom I still work with, dear friend. And he wanted his students in global theology to engage with our members of our congregation. And we did in our little chapel. Those of you who are new have not seen it, but it's a very intimate setting for that kind of activity. And the professor said at that session, there was something that happened that had never happened in any other session he had ever witnessed or heard from his students. There was something chemical that was transmitted. And those students and our devotees became so thoroughly interested in each other. One of our trustees began to read the Bible, New Testament, Old Testament. And some of those SMU students became lifelong friends. That is the power of interspiritual dialogue. After becoming committed Vedantists, Westerners then feel that such academic and interfaith outreach connects their Vedanta tradition with American society in a broad and healthy way. We're not just another cult. We're not just another sect. No, we stand very large in American society. Furthermore, most Westerners take pride in Vedanta's seminal role in interreligious dialogue and sincerely seek to understand how their religion holds up against other religious traditions of the world. And that is one reason I started at this center workshops where I invited people from other disciplines, everyone from a psychiatrist to a a Lakota Sioux shaman, to come in and stand side by side with one of our swamis and speak on a subject. So we get a holistic view of how we fit in with these pressing questions in our life. What is the role of consciousness? What is it? What are tools for life that we need? What are the levels of consciousness? So all of these, it's very important that we project ourselves in circles where these questions are answered to our satisfaction. And in the process, they often find that a meaningful spiritual exchange of fundamental perspectives amongst religious traditions deepens and broadens their own Vedanta perspective. Yeah, it's not about holding you to one singular church. It's about deepening and broadening your spiritual life, however that's done. In order to explain Hinduism to other curious Americans, they in turn are forced to deepen their own study of Vedanta as well as of other world religions. So the breadth of Vivekananda's harmonizing is astonishing. It's not only a religion. He also established the first monastic order in 1886, open to not only Indians, but to Westerners, Slavics, Asians, and Latinos. And we now have centers around the world, including Canada, Europe, Japan, Russia, Brazil, and Argentina, with interested groups growing in Mexico, Puerto Rico, and other South American countries. And he advocated the first monastic order for women in India, the Sarda Mat, which is self-governed by women, the first convent in history that is self-governed by women. And established later in December 1954 under the auspices of the Ramakrishna order. Previously in the West, the first women's convent affiliated with the Ramakrishna order was established at the Vedanta Society of Southern California in Hollywood and in Santa Barbara in 1947. We just held our 75th Jubilee in Southern California. Though Vivekananda, during his lifetime, gave brahmacharya and sannyas in the Ramakrishna order to a number of Western women, including Sisters Nivedita, Christine, Mrs. Oli Bull, and Swami Abhayananda. See how revolutionary he was. He further revolutionized Indian monasticism. When and how? The incident is famous. One day when Ramakrishna was seated in his room, he was surrounded by devotees, and Naran, the future Vivekananda, was present. Ramakrishna was asked by the devotees to describe the main spiritual practices of Vaishnavism. And he said, repeat the name of God, show compassion to all creatures, and serve devotees. And suddenly he repeated, compassion to all creatures, and he went into samadhi. When he returned to a semi-conscious state, he said, compassion for creatures. Who am I to show compassion to others? Not compassion for man, but service to him as a manifestation of God. Naran was the only one in the room to understand the significance of these words. And when he stepped out of the room, he said to himself, I will proclaim this wonderful truth to the world. Swami Vivekananda's to see God in every being and serve them is not just philanthropy, but it is a worship. At the turn of the 20th century, Swami Vivekananda's disciples, Kalyanananda and Nischayananda, worked to establish a dispensary for sadhus. And I think we have a book of their life in our book stall out here. It's very inspiring. The poor and the untouchables in Kankal. Now, the Orthodox sannyasins of the Shankara order, and we belong to the Dasanami, the 10 different branches of the Shankara order, they shunned both swamis as scavenger monks. That's what they called them. Defiled by breaking caste and serving untouchables, and in the process, having to touch excreta of those ailing. But after some time and some years, Swami Dhanaraj Giri, the abbot of the Kailash Mat of the Shankara order, observed their selflessness. Now, these young monks, they went to Kankal, they had nothing. They rented an apartment. Then they went out into the streets, picked up the ailing and the dying, brought them back to their apartment, and then went out and begged for medicine, money for medicine. And later, they served the dying sadhus, who also just lay by the street, and he would pick them up and bring them also. And this Swami Dhanaraj, he observed the spirituality that shone in their faces. And in 1903, he encouraged 2 wealthy businessmen to finance the construction of the hospital ashram at Kankal for their medical relief. This is one of the first hospitals in our order. The abbot also invited both swamis as his honored guests to the traditional congregational feast of the Shankara order, for which they had been excluded up until that point. So with such support and recognition, the Ramakrishna order and Swami Vivekananda's reform monasticism became officially accepted by the traditional Shankara Dasanami sannyasins. Now, this goes way back to the time that Sri Ramakrishna was initiated into the Shankara order by his guru Totapuri. So seva of the living God produced tangible, transformative effects on the character, on those who served, and on those who were served. So what now was the influence of his India travels? Because Vivekananda had extensively toured the Indian subcontinent before he ever went to the West, north, south, east, and west, he acquired firsthand knowledge of the living conditions of the Indian people under the British rule in India. And he was moved by their plight. He resolved to help his countrymen and women by establishing the Ramakrishna Mission in 1897. Revolutionary, again revolutionary, to establish schools, not only for men, but also for women, hostels, orphanages, hospitals, and to employ disaster relief work. First established in May 1898 with Swami Vivekananda's Calcutta Plague Relief Manifesto. During Vivekananda's travels, it was his sister's suicide that opened his eyes to the plight of Indian women trapped in early child marriage, devoid of education and any chance of self-employment, independence, political or social voice, and freedom. See the heart of this man. Up until that time, the Advaita Vedanta monastic tradition within Hinduism emphasized solely meditation, self-inquiry, and study. I've been to India 5 times, and yes, the Shankara order, the monks in the Shankara order, they're pretty much inside their mats, studying, using their analytical will to understand their meditation process. But this was revolutionary. Swami Vivekananda revolutionized Advaita Vedanta tradition in India by demonstrating that one dimension of karma yoga, and this is very important. Karma yoga, serving the living God, is jnana yoga in practice. and we'll talk more about that later. Vivekananda himself said his karma yoga was his greatest work. He goes way back to Krishna's time and reintroduces karma yoga as a viable means, not just of purification so we can meditate, but as a means to self-realization. So what were the broad brushstrokes of Vivekananda's life? Some of you probably already know, some may not know. Where and when was he born? He was born Narendranath Datta in Kolkata, India, to an aristocratic Bengali Kayastha family. He lived from January 12th, 1863 until July 4th, 1902. Sri Ramakrishna foretold his birth and recognized him upon their first meeting as a special soul, what is called an Ishvarakoti, an ever-free soul, with special spiritual powers to spread his life, message, and mission. What was Naren's family like? His father was a lawyer, and his mother was a devoted spiritual aspirant. After his father's death, the family became bankrupt, and debtors appeared at the door to collect what was owed them. So suddenly, the family's fortunes turned. But this dark period was during which Vivekananda went without food so his family could eat. And he learned at that time firsthand the hardships that the poor and the underprivileged underwent. It expanded his heart. Sri Ramakrishna later explained, if Naren had only a childhood of luxury, life would have taken a different course. He would have been a great statesman, a lawyer, an orator, a social reformer. So this poverty from his father's debts awakened an extraordinary empathy for the poor. And it set the stage for the mission of serving the Daridya Narayana, the downtrodden in India. Naren immersed himself in his studies. In 1881, he passed the Fine Arts examination and completed a Bachelor of Arts degree in 1884. But it was his professor, Dr. Hastie, who was explaining Wordsworth's Excursion, the poem, where the state of trance is referred to, and which the poet had had a glimpse while contemplating the beauties of nature. And Professor Hastie explained to the class, such an experience is a result of purity of mind and concentration on some particular object, and it is rare indeed, particularly in these days. I have seen only one person who has experienced that blessed state of mind, and he is Ramakrishna Paramahamsa of Dakshineshwar. You can understand if you go there and see for yourself. It was thus that Naren first heard of his future master. So what was Naren's spiritual development? In college, he became extraordinarily analytical and subordinated his imagination to the demands of reason. In the life of Vivekananda, which I highly recommend, it's a 2-volume book, but it's such a fascinating read if you're really a devotee of this man among men. He said also he was a born idealist and seeker of truth, not content with mere worldly enjoyments. His biographer continues, he longed to pierce the veil of nature, but his reason had to be satisfied at the same time. Beneath the surface of his conscious mind ran the strong current of the desire for reality with a capital R, which made him aware from his earliest years that his life was to be different from the rest of mankind. His first meeting with Sri Ramakrishna demonstrated his strong intellectual reason butting up against the mystical life of an avatar. And this appeals to us in the West. because young Naran didn't succumb to Sri Ramakrishna's mysterious realm of visions without a firm demonstration of logic and reason, workmanship, swordsmanship. So we have Naran's first visit to Dakshineshwar. Sri Ramakrishna immediately took him into a separate room and told him, "Ah, you have come so late. How I yearn to unburden my mind to one who can appreciate my innermost experience." Naran's second visit. Sri Ramakrishna at that time lost no time imparting this vast universal realm of the avatar to his disciple. He touched Naran. And in Naran's words, the touch at once gave rise to a novel experience within me. With my eyes open, I saw that the walls and everything in the room whirled rapidly and vanished into naught. And the whole universe, together with my individuality, was about to merge in an all-encompassing, mysterious void. I was terribly frightened and thought that I was facing death, for the loss of individuality meant nothing short of that. Unable to control myself, I cried out, "What is it that you are doing to me? I have my parents at home." Sri Ramakrishna laughed, and stroking my chest said, "All right, let it rest for now. Everything will come in time." Then there was Naran's third visit to the master. When Sri Ramakrishna saw him, he went into a trance and touched him. And Vivekananda lost all outward consciousness. When he returned to normal consciousness, Sri Ramakrishna was stroking his chest. Ramakrishna explained to others, "I put several questions to him while he was in that state. I asked him about his antecedents and where he lived, his mission in this world, and the duration of his mortal life. He dived deep into himself and gave fitting answers to my questions. They only confirmed what I had seen and inferred about him. Those things shall be a secret, but I came to know that he was a sage who had attained perfection, a past master in meditation, and that the day he knew his real nature, he would give up the body through yoga by an act of will." Sri Ramakrishna compared Naran to others. He said, "Narendra belongs to a very high place, the realm of the absolute. So many devotees come here, but there is not one like him. Every now and then I take stock of the devotees. I find that some are like lotuses with 10 petals, some like those with 16 petals, some like those with 100 petals. But among lotuses, Narendra is 1,000-petaled one." Sri Ramakrishna gave Vivekananda the divine to be his voice, and transmitted to him the experience of Vijnana, seeing God in all. On January 1st, 1886, Ramakrishna bestowed illumination on the lay devotees at Kasipur. The monastics were there, cleaning Sri Ramakrishna's room, and they looked down from the second floor at the spectacle that took place on the grounds and saw how they were all given illumination. Later, Naran said to Sri Ramakrishna, "All others had their realization. Please give me something. All have succeeded. Shall I alone remain unsatisfied?" Sri Ramakrishna said to him, "Settle your family affairs and then come to me. You will get everything. What do you want?" Naran said, "It's my desire to remain absorbed in samadhi continually for 3 or 4 days, only once in a while coming down to the sense plane to eat a little bit of food." Sri Ramakrishna said, "You are a small-minded person. There is a state higher even than that. All that exists art thou. It is you who sing that song. You will attain a state higher than samadhi. At Kasipur one evening, while he was meditating, Naren felt a light at the back of his head, like a torchlight playing there, and it became more and more brilliant, larger and larger, until it seemed to burst, and the mind became merged in it, the realm of the absolute. He was bathed in an ineffable peace, and his heart was overflowing with ecstasy. He realized that the absolute of Vedanta alone could reconcile all philosophies. Sri Ramakrishna said, Mother has shown you everything, meaning the Divine Mother. Just as a treasure is locked up in a box, so will this realization be locked up and the key shall remain with me. You have work to do. When you have finished my work, the treasure box will be unlocked again, and you will know everything then, as you did just now. Sri Ramakrishna further issued the divine mandate. Sometime before passing, Ramakrishna told Naren, my siddhis, meaning my powers, will manifest through you in time. And as a teacher, he would turn many to spiritual life, and he continues to do so. Naren was called to Sri Ramakrishna's bedside, who wrote on a piece of paper, Narendra will teach others. Naren said, I won't do that. And Sri Ramakrishna said to him, you shall have to do it. Sometime later, Sri Ramakrishna called Naren to his bedside and looking steadfastly at him, entered into deep meditation. And Naren in turn felt a subtle force resembling an electric shock entering his body. He lost outer consciousness. And later Sri Ramakrishna said, O Naren, today I have given you my all. By the force of the power transmitted by me, great things will be done by you. Only after that will you go from whence you came. Naren received the highest samadhi at least 5 times that we know of. First from Sri Ramakrishna, second at Camp Percy, third at Lake Michigan, fourth at Thousand Island Park, and finally at his passing. What was his relationship with Ramakrishna? Ramakrishna gave Vivekananda the divine mandate to be his voice without a form. Be his voice without a form. Throughout his time in the West, he received Sri Ramakrishna's divine guidance, protection against vilifiers, Mr. Mazumdar, Christian missionaries. And at a dinner in Detroit, Swami Vivekananda was about to sip a cup of coffee when Sri Ramakrishna appeared in vision to him and said, don't drink, that is poison. In the West, Vivekananda experienced this voice within, which allowed him to give 12 to 14 lectures a week. When he would be exhausted intellectually and think, what is to be done? What shall I say in my lecture tomorrow? This was during his first trip to America, especially this exhausting lecture tour. In the dead of night, voice would call out the thoughts he was to speak that day. It came from a long distance, down a great avenue, and it would draw nearer and nearer, as if someone was delivering the lecture alongside of him. as he lay in bed listening. Or there would be two voices arguing before him, discussing subjects he repeated the next day from the pulpit, sometimes ideas he had never ever heard before. What is the meaning of this? Swami Vivekananda himself said, this is the manifestations of the wider powers of the mind. And also it was Sri Ramakrishna's promise, my siddhis, my powers, will manifest through you in time. He would explain that the subjective automatic workings of the mind, when one possesses vague forms of thought, the mind naturally works to enlarge them and uses the creative faculties to present them. But let's face it, Vivekananda was an Ishvarakoti, and he had the special grace of Sri Ramakrishna. Vivekananda himself said the rishis had such revelations in composing the Upanishads, and Vivekananda referred to them as inspirations. Once his American hostess, and I think it was in Boston on the East Coast, said, Swami, with whom were you talking loudly, enthusiastically last night? Vivekananda smiled. To his close disciples, these experiences revealed powers, potentialities of the self, nothing miraculous. One especially telling example of Vivekananda's relationship with Sri Ramakrishna took place after his first visit to the West. His brother monks objected to his Ramakrishna mission activities. They claimed it didn't stress Ramakrishna's emphasis on bhakti or the practice of sadhana for God realization. Vivekananda first retorted lightly, what do you understand of religion? You are babies. Study, public preaching, and doing humanitarian works are, according to you, Maya, because Sri Ramakrishna did not do them himself, because he said to someone, seek and find God first. Doing good to the world is presumptuous. As if God realization is such an easy thing to achieve, as if he is such a fool as to make himself a plaything in the hands of an imbecile. The brother monks were stunned. Vivekananda was possessed. You think you understand Sri Ramakrishna better than myself. You think jnana is dry knowledge to be attained by a desert path, killing out the tenderest faculties of the heart. Your bhakti is sentimental nonsense, which makes one impotent. Who cares for your Ramakrishna? Who cares for your bhakti and mukti? I am not a servant of Ramakrishna or of anyone, but of him only who serves and helps others without caring for his own mukti. His voice became choked, his frame shook, and he ran from the room. His brother disciples were seized with fear, and they later found Vivekananda seated in meditation, his body stiff, tears flowing, absorbed in Bhava Samadhi. 1 hour passed, and he arose, washed his face, came out of his room, and the atmosphere was tense. He said to his brother disciples, when one attains bhakti, one's heart and nerves become so soft and delicate that they cannot bear even the touch of a flower. I cannot think or talk of Sri Ramakrishna long without being overwhelmed. So I am trying and trying always to keep down the rush of bhakti welling within me. I am trying to bind and bind myself with the iron chain of jnana, for still my work is unfinished and my message to the world not yet fully delivered. I have work to do. I am a slave of Ramakrishna who left his work to be done by me and will not give me rest till I have finished it. And oh, how shall I speak of him? Oh, his love for me. What was Vivekananda's impact internationally? I want to be a voice without a form. This is how, in the 1970s, one of my senior monastic sisters, she was the head of our Santa Barbara convent, and she was visiting her Christian aunt in the Bible Belt in Chattanooga, Tennessee. She came to hear a Ramakrishna parable being told from a Baptist pulpit. Ramakrishna was not given recognition for this, but the parable is known to all of us. Once several men were crossing the Ganges in a boat. One of them, a pundit, was making a great display of his erudition, saying that he had studied various books, the Vedas, the Vedanta, and the 6 systems of philosophy. And he asked a fellow passenger, a very simple man, "Do you know the Vedanta?" "No, revered sir." "The Sankhya and the Patanjala?" "No, revered sir." "Have you read no philosophy whatsoever?" "No, revered sir." The pundit was talking in this vein, and the passenger was sitting in silence when a great storm arose and the boat was about to sink. And the simple passenger turned to the pundit. "Sir, can you swim?" "No," replied the pundit. The passenger then said, "I don't know the Sankhya or the Patanjala, but I can swim." When posted in Dallas, Texas, also in America's Bible Belt, I'd never seen so many churches in a city in my life, coming from California. Paul, our next door neighbor, who was a Southern Baptist, and this ground here was where his house was. He was very friendly, and he asked me, "What do you believe in?" And I said, "The harmony of religions, that all religions lead to the same truth." And he told me, "I believe that too," much to my astonishment. So we see Sri Ramakrishna's universal approach to the 4 yogas inspired Swami Vivekananda to compile and author the 4 yogas, which again today form the 4 pillars of spiritual practice in the Ramakrishna Vedanta tradition. And if you ask me, what should I read if you're a newcomer, I would say The Life of Ramakrishna, probably by Christopher Isherwood, The Life of Holy Mother, that gives you a great, good, solid basis. The Life of Vivekananda and his 4 yogas. That is a good beginning. These yogas are a holistic approach to spirituality. Each yoga corresponds to one of 4 aspects of our psychophysical being: emotions, bhakti yoga; active life, karma yoga; contemplative nature, raja yoga; analytical mind, dhyana yoga. Swami Vivekananda's 4 yogas are also universal masterpieces. Not only do they gather and clearly systematize core universal principles, teachings, and practices within Hinduism, but are also designed to be applicable to aspirants of other spiritual traditions. Swami Vivekananda's teachings are a commentary on Sri Ramakrishna's universal message of the harmony of religions. He exhorted us to look past external forms in which truths are clad, the scriptures, mythologies, philosophies, rituals, to what Vivekananda called the internal soul of every religion. Vivekananda taught each religious tradition takes up one angle, one aspect of a universal truth, and devotes itself to embodying and typifying that part of a great truth. Hence, religions can only add, never subtract from the universal truth as they progress from lower truth to higher truth. Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda expand Vedanta's breadth and depth to mean not only universal, and holistic, but also a tradition that is both ancient and modern. We get it all. They taught through their own lives the interconnectivity of all life and oneness. They were so in tune with all life. When one day Sri Ramakrishna saw a man walk across a distant field of grass, he writhed in pain as if someone had trampled his chest. And in fact, bruises actually appeared on Sri Ramakrishna's chest. This state of oneness arises when the Brahmagyani experience, they embody the universe. At that moment, Sri Ramakrishna embodied the universe. He had that experience. Swami Vivekananda introduced a simple, direct approach of the Vedic Rishi to see the world as spiritually alive. He took his Western disciples into nature at Camp Taylor. He built a fire on a spit of sand by a stream, and the disciples, they were all Western disciples, sat around at night, men and women, as he told the ancient stories of Sukadeva and Vyasa. When it came time for meditation, Vivekananda said, "You may meditate on whatever you wish, but I shall meditate on the heart of a lion. That gives strength." I first wondered why. And now I see how contemporary Americans find this meditation so strengthening and therapeutic in times of stress, distress, and despondency. When I was invited to the Raleigh Vedanta Center this last January, and I went there before, they have a huge Sunday school. And I was asked to speak to the kids. There are about 20 of them, ages anywhere from, 8 to teenagers. And so I gave them the meditation on the heart of a lion. And we had a heart-to-heart talk about bullying. And they all expressed to me how strengthening that meditation was for them. And they were mostly Indian kids at that center, so they obviously had to deal with a lot of prejudice in their school. So in conclusion, the universal message of Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda is broad, is deep, is multifaceted. First, we have the harmony of religions, a recognition of the universal heart at the core of every religious tradition, and the paths of dualism, qualified non-dualism, and non-dualism as various rungs on the ladder to truth. Second, Sri Ramakrishna exhibited a universal lifestyle. He was both an ideal monk and an ideal householder. Vivekananda transcended nation and caste, the first Hindu to travel outside India to broadcast Vedanta to the world, and consequently was barred from some temples in India. Vivekananda ate our food. He wore our dress. He spoke our language. He loved our country and its women and men as his very own. Third and fourth, Ramakrishna and Vivekananda taught a holistic and universal approach to spiritual life by utilizing all the 4 yogas within Hinduism. Vivekananda went on to encourage all spiritual seekers to yoke each of the 4 aspects to our psyche, to the goal of spiritual self-development. We can turn our emotions into devotion to God, our actions into selfless service, our mind into an instrument of self-introspection and meditation, and our intellect into the discriminative faculty of self-inquiry. Fifth, Ramakrishna and Vivekananda are world teachers. The 4 yogas are so clearly laid out, universal in application, available and relevant to any seeker from any spiritual tradition. In the West, Vivekananda's teachings of the harmony of religions, the oneness, and the unity and diversity sunk into Americans' collective consciousness. Seventh, Vivekananda's expansion of karma yoga to include serving the living God expands our temple to also include our home, our workplace, our every place. And along with this message is Vivekananda's expanded meaning of Vedanta to include all knowledge and therefore all types of work. In this context, and I'll end with this, Sister Nivedita's introduction to the complete works of Vivekananda summarizes this final universal message of Vivekananda, Sri Ramakrishna's greatest commentator. She wrote, "If the many and the one be indeed the same reality, then it is not all modes of worship alone, but equally all modes of work, all modes of struggle, all modes of creation, which are paths to realization. No distinction henceforth between sacred and secular. To labor is to pray. To conquer is to renounce. Life is itself religion." She ended by saying, "This is a realization which makes Vivekananda the great preacher of karma, not as divorced from, but as expressing jnana and bhakti. To him, the workshop, the study, the farmyard, and the field are as true and fit scenes for meeting of God man as the cell of a monk or the door of a temple. To him, there is no difference between the service of man and the worship of God." This is why Vivekananda matters.